Well, it's been just a wonderful journey for me. I'm amazed at my life and ministry, and it's all because of God's grace and power and guidance through the years, and something I will forever be thankful. Here we go. I appreciate this opportunity this morning to share a few thoughts on the video of the sermon that I really thought I could preach at one point, but afterwards decided that was impossible. But in thinking about a theme for a sermon, I prayed about it, and the answer finally came on being thankful. On being thankful characterizes not only my life, but also my ministry. There's so much to be thankful for. And of course, there's some very interesting scriptures. The Bible, of course, is full of references to being thankful. But Paul, in Ephesians, the 5th chapter and the 20th verse, has this to say: always, in everything, giving thanks to God. Now that doesn't leave a lot of room. It doesn't say sometimes and for some things. Always, in everything, giving thanks to God. And then in Corinthians, he was concerned that some of the leaders of the church were taking too much credit to themselves for the accomplishments that had taken place in the Corinthian church. So in writing a letter in 1 Corinthians, the 4th chapter and the 7th verse, he asks this question: what have you that you did not receive? Of course, it's a rhetorical question for which he would have the answer: you don't have anything other than what you have received. And he goes on to say, then if you have received it, it is a gift. And if it is a gift, of course, be thankful to others and be thankful to God. In thinking about my life and ministry, I remembered that the conference had a pastor's school in August each year at Appleton, because we could use the university dormitory to house all the ministers. And the sessions were held at First Church. I recall when Dr. Douglas Steer was one of the professors leading one of these courses, he began this lecture with this story. He said a new bishop was assigned to an area, so that he and his wife decided that they would visit the various districts to get acquainted with the ministers and their families. So while he was doing that, unfortunately, the area parsonage was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. The ministers, the older ministers, said, well, wasn't that awful? Just think, he lost all of his sermons. And then some of the younger ministers sort of laughingly said, oh no, he had both of them with him. Well, we all laughed at that story, but then Dr. Steer came right back with this punchline: there only are really two sermons: what God has done for you and what you have done for God. And as I thought about my ministry, certainly I was very much aware of what God had done for me. I was fortunate to grow up in a Christian home. The seeds of faith were planted early. And in the course of my growing up, and especially in my teenage years, I made a special commitment of my life to Jesus Christ. And I received the forgiveness of my sins and the promise of peace and joy and life everlasting. I was most grateful for that experience, for it was a life-changing faith, and a faith that enabled me to be what God was seeking for me to achieve. For this, I have always been most grateful. And in the process of my growing up, of course, in my high school years, the thought of entering the ministry was quite prominent from time to time in my thinking, but I always rejected it. But in my senior year, I read a story in a publication for youth that our church put out, and that story spoke to me, and I said, Lord, yes, I will endeavor to be a minister. And that evening I shared that with my parents. This was in 1930. A lot of things have happened, of course, since that time. But as I think of reasons for gratitude, certainly the first and most prominent is what God has done for me. And I thank God daily for His saving grace and commitments on my part that had to be renewed again and again throughout my life and ministry. As I think of a second point, not only my own faith and the experience of God's grace, I sense that I had challenging opportunities in my active ministry, challenging opportunities in the churches I served, challenging opportunities on the district, and I suspect the most challenging of churches and districts was the Appleton First Church when I became its pastor, and then later being appointed as the superintendent of the Milwaukee district during the 60s when there was great racial problems that we faced, not only as a church, but of course as a community. And I discovered what I've always known, that of course the Christian faith is not only a personal relationship with God. The Christian faith has two-sided coins, one the personal aspect, but the other is the social justice aspect, because we can't be individual Christians. We're always a part of a community, and it is important for a Christian to witness his faith in terms of justice and a spirit of community that enables persons who are in unfortunate circumstances to be able to seek hope for a better life. And so for these challenging opportunities that I had as a Christian minister, I am most grateful. And then I'm also most grateful that through the years, a supportive family made it easier for me to serve and witness and be true to my faith. Actually, I had 4 families. There was my birth family, and that influence was very important, for there the seeds of faith were planted. Then there was my married family, 3 sons, and then their wives who became my daughters-in-law, and their love and influence upon my life and my ministry. And then there was the gifted or the step family that came into my life, because I had known the sadness of losing the spouse and the mother of my 3 sons, which was a very difficult time, but remembering Paul's word, always in everything giving thanks to God, and I found that a source of comfort and strength to face these very difficult times. But then the gifted family brought 2 new sons and their families, attorneys, and I suspect, I don't know that they could have kept me out of trouble, but I certainly could have their influence if something happened and I got into trouble, for 2 attorneys to get me out of trouble. But I'm grateful for that gifted family and for the connections that have resulted in our total families that have been most meaningful. And finally, of course, the church family. And the church family that means most to me, of course, is the Beaver Dam United Methodist Church. For it was here that I served for 5 years, and now have been retired for 33, so a total of 38 years I've been a resident of Beaver Dam. And I have appreciated friends in the church family who have been so helpful to me, especially when I needed more services that came about because I'd gotten a few years older. Well, let me conclude by saying I'm grateful that my family is present here this morning, celebrating my 100th birthday a month early, but the total family, grandchildren and great-grandchildren are here, and I thank God for that. As I think of the future, these words of Robert Louis Stevenson come to mind. I know not what the future holds of marvel or surprise. I only know that life and death God's mercy underlie. I know not where the islands lift their fronded palms in air. I only know I cannot drift beyond God's love and care. And in that faith I find comfort, and I'm grateful for. It's been wonderful to share for you in these few moments. Thank you.